I've been trying to figure out why I've been weirdly optimistic lately, and I think it's because the lies of progressivism are becoming as hard to maintain on the economic side as they already are socially. The way lazy rhetoric used to be used to carry woke argument back in the 2010s, where you could just shut down people for not going along with it, that same dynamic existed in economics too. It worked because most people didn't really understand the counter arguments. But now it feels like that's breaking down. The progressive arguments just don't hit the same anymore. What I mean is you can go down the list and it all sounds so hollow. The idea that you can tax one group and it only affects them. The idea that tariffs hurt other countries instead of raising prices at home. The idea that you can print money and spend endlessly without consequence. The idea that inflation is just caused by greed. The idea that government programs somehow create more value than they take in. The idea that you can just regulate outcomes without distorting the system underneath. The idea that redistribution is just obviously compassionate without asking what it actually does. And the difference is now you don't have to argue this stuff in theory anymore because people have lived through the failures. You can point to inflation and people know the government caused it. It's not a sudden increase in greed. You can point to tariffs and people understand prices go up. Basically, the gap between policy and unintended consequence just isn't what it used to be. A few years ago, you could kind of get away with shutting down criticism by labeling anything outside of progressivism as extreme or dangerous. And don't get me wrong, progressives still try to label anything that isn't progressive as fascist, but it just doesn't land the same way anymore since wokeness is seen to be widely repudiated by the public. However, economic wokeness, things like UBI and government-running firms and industrial strategies are only half dead. The good news is they aren't going to last because they are ideas which are intrinsically political, and again, they aren't able to disassociate the costs and corruption and the rationing we all expect and observe. All Keynesians can do is double down and claim the problem is lack of spending. In a way, the liberals and socialists have always been self-defeating economically, but what's changed now is the narratives aren't holding, and that's great. We all know how important narrative is, even if it's silly, like thinking all of history is essentially a giant union negotiation, which is what leftists and liberals seem to believe. Granted, probably some people only are against tariffs and war because Trump is doing it, but they have had to at least mouth the truth of how price controls are backwards. It doesn't matter that people were against the war on terror because they hated Bush. The point is they now understand what blowback is. Like with economic intervention and printing after COVID and after Trump's tariffs and war, the public now understand what shortages are. You can't make them forget how inherently destructive and unapologetic public authorities are and how difficult it is to deal with public institutions. You don't really see people seriously arguing that prices are just made up and that markets don't matter, except Marxists, of course, and they desperately have to try and keep labor theory and their other myths from dying off, which they eventually will, but they don't count. You don't see serious people actually suggesting that billionaires can just set prices however they want, because it's clear, for example, that Trump can't decide to make oil cheap. Economics is real, trade-offs are real, and you can't just wish that away. So I think that's where the optimism comes from. It's getting harder to pretend that progressive policy works, and more importantly, it's getting harder to use this naive frame that government action just works by default. If anything, people are cluing into the fact that asking for things from government is like asking a genie or a monkey's paw or a leprechaun. They don't work for you. It's undeniable that the government isn't the same as the people and that policies have real costs, which the state will never advertise. And once people start to see that, it's hard to unsee it.